Grabbing my favorite cornerback so far and a running back to boot. It's Mock Draft Monday on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey. Welcome, got a loop there. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. You can also find the show on Amazon Fire or Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. And today it's Mock Draft Monday. That is where I'm going to do the sim every Monday from now until the draft, and we'll kind of talk about who we talk about. So I'm using the PFN mock sim, by the way, for those who care, and whatever board is on that is what like the AI is drafting off of. But really, whether or not it's a realistic scenario or whatever is kind of neither here nor there. And if you do enough mock draft simulations, you will get to quote unquote unrealistic scenarios. And that's sort of part of the exercise because like weird stuff happens in the draft. Guys fall that you don't really think you should. And you should probably have a sense for, well, what would I do if, if Anthony Richardson fell to 23? That won't happen. But like, what if it did? What would I do? Right? Like that kind of is part of it. And that's part of this exercise. But for me, Mock Draft Monday is an excuse to talk about players we haven't talked about yet. And here's the deal. I forced the issue. I want to talk about Joey Porter. That because I am in love. I watched him this weekend and I'm in love. So I'm going to find a way to draft Joey Porter. I'm going to trade up and I'm going to kind of use this as a proof of concept, I guess. If I get real obsessed with like one guy, how can I make that happen? And will it be worth it to move up? Because Joey Porter probably doesn't fall to 23. Probably more of a 15-ish guy. So can I trade up to 15-ish? And in this, it ended up being 16 with Washington, who was still on the board. And if I do that, that costs a first and a third. Can I still like my draft? And that's the question that we're going to try to answer with this simulation. So I'm going to trade up for Joey Porter. And I did. I traded up for Joey Porter at 16. And then I only had a fourth round. I only did a 4-round mock. I didn't bother with the 5th and 6th rounders. But am I happy by the end of round 4? Because the rest of it's just depth anyways. And I guess, I don't know. We'll assess that at the end. But that's going to be the question here. But let me first defend my decision to trade a first and a third to go up for Joey Porter. Pick 23, pick 27 for pick 16. Use pick 16 on Joey Porter. Now, yes, he's Joey Porter's son. And that, honestly, I saw somebody do the comp that was like, if Joey Porter had a son and that son played quarterback, which is like a really good, hey, what if you made Joey Porter's son a cornerback? He's so like his dad in that way. He's so physical. And with Joey Porter, that's the thing to know about him is that he's a luchador in kind of all the best and worst ways. It's just impossible to fight through him. If your route has to go through him, you're just not going to win. I mean, maybe there's some big AJ Brown type guys out there that can do it, but against, on the other side of the Eagles, like Devonta Smith, like the smaller guys are going to have to go around him. And that just makes their job a little bit harder. And if you're just running like a go route outside of him, like if you're between him and the sideline, he'll not only use the sideline and like squeeze that space, he'll squeeze you all the way off the field into the sideline. And now suddenly, the ref's throwing his hat. You've got to reestablish yourself and you're basically out of the read. And they're like, that happens like a weird amount of the time. You see it in the run game and in screens and stuff. He'll blow you up. He's, I think, a pretty good tackler. There were a couple misses on tape that I didn't like, but he seemed to address that issue quickly. And in fact, there were a couple of examples of like that I saw, which is, I guess, the next thing is you can kind of see him have an issue, then address it in the middle of a game. And usually it's minor stuff that, wouldn't really go on the high level scouting report, but he had one game. It was Ohio State where he attacked the wrong hip a couple times and let up a couple big runs. Usually when you're attacking, a hit. If you're a corner, you're running up to somebody and they're running at you, you want to try to dive at their opposite hip. And they're actually going to try to not give you the opposite hip, because that's the best way to take somebody down, is to attack whatever hip is on the other side of you and then just like pull them down, right? Do the alligator thing. And he would attack the near hip a lot, which is fine. It's doable if that's the angle you have, but it's a lot harder because you now have to go kind of through their momentum and through their body. Whereas if you're attacking the opposite hip, you're using their momentum against them. And he missed a couple tackles doing that. And maybe it's just a body presence thing. And you just didn't quite have, there just wasn't quite enough Joey Porter for that kind of move. And he bounced off and he misses the tackle. And then you see later in that game, you see him like make a tackle the other way and set up his angle better the other way, where he's kind of gonna come in a little bit more directly, make it harder for the runner to kind of deny that opposite hip and make it harder for him to turn his body that way. It feels like he got a note on the sideline and implemented it immediately. And that's a pretty advanced thing to be able to do. You don't have to recreate techniques. He's already at a point where you could say, hey, change that step. Like, he's comfortable enough with the fundamentals where he can start to make tweaks on the margins on the fly. And so it's a very polished game. And I think that's the evidence of it. The best one I have, and I'll have a Patreon video on Joey Porter coming out probably this week, is... it was against Purdue, and he was getting killed on slants because he would take a shuffle step to the outside and then they would release inside and he's out of position. And that shuffle step to the outside was to make him better at go routes. Might have been a preparation thing. I think he got a halftime note, or maybe just a note. It felt like about halftime in the game. I didn't actually look at, I don't know when he got it, but he got a note that said, don't do that shuffle step anymore. Just do one step, then plant and push off if he starts releasing inside of you. He did that. He broke up like 4 slants, totally punished Purdue over it. That's really advanced. That's really veteran stuff. And there's all kinds of veteran advanced stuff on his tape. He'll be in a zone and he'll actually be able to pass a guy off and then break on a ball, all while keeping his eyes on the quarterback and on the ball. He's got that kind of ball is mine mentality that you really, really want in corners, where even if you're on the other side of the play, the ball goes up, that ball is mine, I'm going at it. Because you never know when a tip drill is going to happen. It's actually going to bounce more in range of you than you thought. He has that, and he has all kinds of like dog and fight in him. But you can also see him like use that to set the edge as the force in a running play, or to blow up a bubble screen that's coming his way. So that physicality, again, it's like, yeah, what if Joey Porter had a son? And that son played cornerback. I'm not done with the eval by a long shot. There's a lot of other stuff, mostly the bad stuff, right? Of course, he's not the perfect prospect. Otherwise, he'd go 1 overall. So let's talk about some of that and what might make him sink to this 15, 16-ish range. But I'm very excited about him. I'm also very excited because a little later, I'm getting some Built Bar in. I still like to have it delivered to my door, although you don't have to with Built Bar. You can now go to Sam's Club or Walmart and just pick up a box right off the shelf. But Built Bar, if you are unfamiliar, which probably means you're just new to the show, Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, all covered in 100% chocolate, comes in ridiculous flavors like cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puffs. But like I said, covered in 100% chocolate, tastes like a candy bar. It's absolutely delicious. But 130 calories in one of these bad boys. For like a real candy bar, that's going to be, 17 or like 25 grams of sugar, 30 grams of sugar, 350 calories in a bar about that size. Nope, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. This is a protein bar, as much as your lizard brain won't believe that it is, and it will believe that you're having a lovely midnight treat, which is my favorite way to consume them. So go to built.com and get some Built Bar, or go down to Sam's Club or Walmart and get a box for yourself. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. I would love it if you check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. Have a Joey Porter, a lot of the same points here, but visual out probably later this week. But if you want, there's a free video on Christian Gonzalez if you want to watch a different corner, get a sense for like what that analysis is and if you would like it. And then if you want to sign up, you can watch other ones on Keely Ringo, Quentin Johnston. I think Trenton Simpson is coming out, the linebacker out of Clemson. So if you want to watch those, and I will continue to post them throughout draft season. Joey Porter is my favorite corner so far. Now, I've only watched Gonzalez Ringo and Joey Porter. So I know everybody's really excited about Clark Phillips. Everybody's really excited about Devin Witherspoon. He's coming down the pipe too. There's a Cam Smith, I think. So there's other corners, not locking it in, but he's my favorite so far. And I think the fact that I like him better than Christian Gonzalez is kind of a hot take. But the physicality is a big part of that. And a huge part of that is scheme fit with the Vikings specifically. I'm talking from a Vikings specific perspective. And I think Joey Porter fits what the Vikings want to do a little better. Christian Gonzalez struggles a little more to come off a block. And I think Brian Flores won't like that very much. But all that aside, both these guys are going in the top half of the first round, right? So what I think will sink Joey Porter lower than someone like Gonzalez, and I think that that's totally fair. Like, I'm not going to argue with you if you think Gonzalez is better. But what will sink him lower is grabbies. So like I said, the good and the bad of being too physical, he's a luchador. Well, if you wrestle the wide receiver downfield, that's kind of a flag. Like, you can't do that. That's 5 yards and automatic first down. And he will do that a lot. And it's more than just being a little grabby, right? In the NFL, they call it so tight and so ticky-tacky. It's so illegal to play defensive back in the NFL, which I hate. But it is going to be an adjustment for him because he cannot play with that same physicality. He's going to have to dial back his physicality, which sucks because that's part of what makes him good. And he's going to have to dial that back. Now, looking at the rest of his game, I do still think he has good game if you dial back that physicality. It's not that he is only good because he is physical. I think it's his biggest strength, but he has lots of really smooth hips. He has 4.47 speed, which is okay. It's enough. It's not a major minus. But he's got good burst and he can recover. He has really, really good instincts. I think he's a really heady player. And all of that will put together into, once you have him dial back to physicality, he can still play corner, which is a really important thing for me because he is going to have to dial back that physicality. But there's two kind of issues here. So one is when he is near you, he wants to have his hands on you. And that's a lot of hugging and holding and grabbing. And it's not just, putting a hand on you to feel if you're breaking away from me while I watch the ball or the quarterback like some zone defenders do. It's grabby. It's fighting, pushing, shoving, stuff that you can't do when the ball is in the air, and he just likes to do it. And look, in college, you get away with it a lot. In the NFL, you won't get away with it as much. And he didn't get away with it in college all of the time either. So there's that. But then there's also when he does get beat, and I think the reasons he gets beat are usually pretty minor, subtle things or, really good stuff from the receiver. When he does get beat, and it's like mostly off of the line, and I think it's mostly just kind of taking the wrong step at the line of scrimmage, trying to guess their route a little bit. And it's not often he'll grab. His instinct is panic, arm out, and I'm going to try to grab and pull myself back into phase with you. And that is just a habit you cannot have. If you get beat, you just got to let that guy go because you can't just turn that. You might be able to turn around and recover. And that's got to be his move. And I think he can, even though his testing was meh on that front. I like, you can see him do it on tape. So I think he can. But he's got to learn to turn around. He's got to trust that part of his game, which works. He just doesn't choose it. And so he's just got to start choosing it. And I think that's the question I always get with these guys is, well, how fixable is that problem? Blah, blah, blah. I think that's a problem that can be fixed with a conversation. And if you must, give him the boxing gloves treatment in camp. But I don't think this is a thing. I don't think it's bad enough. Well, the grabbies are bad enough to not put him on the field right away. So I think you got to give him the boxing glove treatment in camp. But it's absolutely like a mini camp with the boxing gloves on. And I think you can get this out of him. It's like the goal of it. It's like the main thing D-backs coaches have to deal with these kids out of college is that they all have grabbies because the college refs don't call it the same way. So I'm not panicking about it at all. And I think any DB coach worth his salt should be able to give him, I'm joking about the boxing gloves treatment, which is famously the thing Mike Zimmer did with Xavier Rhodes when he had this problem. And it worked great. So I'm kind of joking about it, but also I'm kind of not. Give him the boxing gloves if you have to, because we've seen it work. But it's like the 1A thing NFL coaches are used to fixing, which is why I have a decent amount of faith that it can get fixed. So that's why I like Joey Porter. And the idea of Joey Porter as a Viking has me salivating. I absolutely love it. He's like truly my draft crush so far. And I think it's a bit of a pipe dream to ask him to fall to 23. So we traded up with Washington, with the Commanders, to 16. We gave him number 23 and 87 to move up to 16. And I think this is about fair play. So giving up 87 kind of stinks, though, because what else did we need? And I think one of the biggest mid-round needs the Vikings have might end up being running back, depending on what happens with Dalvin Cook. So this is, if you think, the thing about these mock drafts that happen before free agency, which this is going to be the last one, by the way. Well, no, I get it, because I'll record on March 12th. I'll record like at night on March 12th, and then March 13th, tampering starts. So I'll have a mock draft that comes out the morning that tampering is going to start. So I guess one more, but I have to make them before I actually know the makeup of the Vikings roster going into the draft, right? I don't know who gets cut. I don't know who gets signed. So I don't know where their running back situation is going to be, if they still have Dalvin Cook or not. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, this is a world where they cut Dalvin Cook, where they don't get as much as they want at corner. Maybe they strike out on some corners. They get a center in free agency probably. And like, there's a world where this can make sense, where you get a corner and a running back. So let's say that this draft continues, and let's say that the biggest Vikings need now is a running back, and that they are, their next pick is in the 4th round. And let's just say that it all kind of stays there. Let's continue onward. So part of the draw of this running back class, and I think the question I'm trying to answer in this part of the exercise, is that there's supposed to be this middle band of 3rd, 4th round running backs that are really good, that are starting quality guys that you can get in the 3rd and 4th round, and therefore don't take Bijan Robinson, don't take, this Gibbs kid in the 1st round. Like, you don't have to do any of that, because you can get a kid that's plenty good in the 3rd or 4th round. So as we go to the 4th round here, and the next Vikings pick is at 116. So I went from 16 to 116, 100 picks between Vikings picks, which is obviously not great. And I don't think that that's the way things are going to end up here. But I like this as a stress test, because the point of this class at running back, and again, I'm kind of going through a phase of the draft, or I'm going through a future where the Vikings needed a cornerback and where they cut Dalvin Cook for cap space, but that everything else kind of stayed intact. They probably spent some money on a center. They maybe spent some money somewhere on the defensive line. Kept Harrison Smith in the building, all of that stuff, and they need a running back because they cut Dalvin Cook for cap space. And if I'm in that situation, can I afford to go to the 3rd or 4th round? In this case, 4th round. Can I afford to just wait till the 4th round and still address my problem? And the answer is yes, because we got Tyjae Spears out of Tulane. I really like this kid. He's one of my favorite back. Now, I'm only 5 or 6 deep in the running back class, but he's one of my favorites that I've scouted so far. And I think he has a lot of the stuff that you're promised when you're taking like a Bijan Robinson in the 1st round. And I watched Bijan, and then Spears was my next running back. So I'm really 1-for-1 comparing these two guys. And because they kind of represent the thesis of, well, why draft Bijan Robinson? We have Tyjae Spears in the 4th round. Why wouldn't you just do that, right? What I see the difference between those two guys is, Bijan Robinson is a better prospect, of course, and nobody disagrees with that. I think his feet sets himself up in a way, like, I think that he's my Bijan Robinson comp is working man's Adrian Peterson because of the way that he jump cuts. Although that's not like a perfect comparison, because Adrian Peterson could never catch and Bijan Robinson could. And I think a back like Peterson today wouldn't be the prospect that he is, just because the game has kind of changed around him. But I digress. The things you're getting that are different with Bijan Robinson, you get a lot better footwork, but Tyjae Spears is still a positive. Like, it's still really good. Bijan Robinson's is just, I think, a little bit more angle warping. And so it's just a little bit more stressful on defenses. But what Tyjae Spears gives you is still enough. He has a burst through the hole that I think Bijan Robinson doesn't have, because of his obsession with always jump cutting, because he can't quite do it with no acceleration or with no deceleration. And that's the deal when it comes to like running back footwork. And I'm sort of meandering around this, but if you are going to plant your foot and jump, maybe a better example of this is Eric Gray, who is Oklahoma and who I think wants to be Adrian Peterson. where he will plant his foot and he'll cut across two gaps. He'll come to a full stop to do it. And in the world of the run game, where every single step is precious, every fraction of a second is precious, you can't really afford to do that. And so you'll kind of, holes will close on you while you're trying to jump and kind of rock back and forth. So you need to have a smooth footwork thing. And Tyjae Spears still has a jump cut. It's nothing like Bijan's, but he has it. And he has the slalom smooth footwork. So there's a little bit more versatility there in terms of how you can attack gaps. And depending on where the angles are, depending on how the run play has developed, how the defense is fitting it, you're going to need both of those tools. And one of the things with Bijan that sort of, and go listen to my episode about him from, I think it was last week, but one of the things there was that I never really saw him do that sort of smooth bending turn. He went all the way to the front point of the run, decided it wasn't there, and then he would plant a leg and jump cut. And I would much rather have seen a little bit less stuff go on, a little bit less wasted motion, and Tyjae Spears has that. So that's an advantage that you actually get with your fourth round guy versus the guy that's supposed to be a first round guy. Again, Bijan gives you a lot of other stuff, so I'm not saying that Tyjae Spears is a better player. Don't freak out. But I think Tyjae Spears is good enough in pass pro. I think he's got good enough elusiveness. That's probably the singular thing that you're missing the most out on with Bijan Robinson is he is very shifty, very jump cutty, he makes guys miss all the time. Tyjae Spears makes guys miss, but only some of the time. But it's still like a package that I can be pretty excited about. And if I take him and put him in a room with Ty Chandler and Kene Wangu, and that's my committee, I think I can roll with that and be pretty happy with it. And that's using a fourth round pick. So as a proof of concept, assuming that this was an offseason that didn't leave me with so many roster holes as to need all those extra picks, if I'm just like, man, I need a corner and eventually I need to get a running back, then that means that I feel okay with doing something like using my third round pick to jump up and get a corner that I'm absolutely in love with. Now, I probably won't have to do that once I'm done with the corner class, like with Clark Phillips scouted and Cam Smith scouted, and knowing how I feel about those guys, I probably won't have to be so desperate. But trading up for a corner feels like a feasible move, assuming the board falls in such a way where there's only one guy left that you like and he's available at 16, 17. I don't think I would let it fall anymore. And I would just say, you know what, screw it. Let's go get him because we can make this work. That's where I'm at on this, at least. Tomorrow's Twitter Tuesday. You can send me your questions about this or anything else at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. You can also fill out the form in the show notes, leave a YouTube comment, or send me an email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. I will see you all for that tomorrow. And as always, Skol.